there's a huge amount of cost that could be reduced without having to change the home size at all. So he's right. And somebody needs to also fight that fight. I agree. That is a fight worth fighting. Absolutely. Make the home that is that size, make it more affordable without having to change it and make people give up.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Glick. We have an industry news episode for you today, and joining me, as always, is Charles Covey. How's it going, Charles?
Hello, hello.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of you who are listening in and not watching, he waved first before he spoke. So that was the noise of the wave. But yeah, we've got some really good topics to get into today. We're going to start with the news that came out last week, which was the Fed cutting interest rates. We're going to then dig into Beazer Homes CEO on his approach to building affordable housing. And I think that's a little bit different than what we've talked about in the past. I think he has a little bit different stance than what you do, Charles. So definitely interested in hearing your thoughts on his comments versus what you think. And then we're going to finish out with a couple LinkedIn posts that are on some interesting topics related to, could manufactured housing be a possible solution for the housing crisis? And then also build to rent stock compared to the percent of apartments in some of the major metros around the country. So a lot of really good stuff here we're going to be getting into. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the first article, which comes to us from realtor.com. Headline reads, Fed cuts interest rate again, 5 key takeaways. From this article, the Federal Reserve cut its target federal funds rate again by 0.25 percentage points, bringing the range to 3.75% to 4%. The rate cut reflects the Fed's growing concern about a slowing labor market and broader economic softness, even while inflation remains above desired levels. There's visible division among Fed policymakers. Some argued for a larger cut, others preferred no cut at all, signaling uncertainty in the outlook. For potential home buyers and owners, the cut is potentially helpful. Lower short-term rates can ease some borrowing cost pressure, but the impact is muted in the mortgage market because mortgage rates are more tied to long-term yields than the Fed's benchmark. Mortgage rates have recently eased somewhat, reaching the lowest levels in over a year, which offers some modest relief in affordability, but they are still above historical norms and remain a drag on many would-be buyers. On the supply side, home prices remain elevated and inventory remains constrained in many markets, meaning that even with slightly lower rates, affordability challenges persist. For developers and land prospecting professionals, this cut offers a slight tailwind. Financing costs may ease, but significant change depends on how long-term yields, lending competition, and land and lot market dynamics also evolve. The underlying message, the rate cut is a signal that the Fed is shifting toward more supportive policy, but it's not a fix for housing affordability or development headwinds. The improvement will be gradual and dependent on downstream effects. Thoughts on this, Charles?
Yeah, I think the end of this is would sum up my thoughts is that it's not the fix all. I think we've talked a lot about interest rates over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, a lot. And I don't want to overstate the fact that this is not the only thing that affects the market, right? It is a factor, and sometimes it can be a significant factor, but there's so many other elements. Something that's interesting is that we're going to see some, especially in the development space, whether it's apartments or BTR or these other large projects, we've still got to see lenders want to do the deal. And the interest rate helps, but there also has to be a shift in the lending marketplace, a shift, especially in equity flowing to those projects so that they can happen. And then also the other underlying issues of land costs not shifting the way it should and some other things. So it is a factor, and I'm glad that it's coming down, but there's still plenty of other things to sort through.
Yep. And so the Fed meets one more time this year coming up in December. And so we'll see if there is anything that happens during that next meeting to finish out the year. But as we've talked about, the big concern is obviously, as they talk about here too, is inflation. And so if rates get cut too fast, inflation is going to be a problem. Inflation is already a problem. And so I think that's why people are surprised with cuts in general, is just inflation's not coming down the way they want to see it come down.
I was going to add in that I was definitely guilty of thinking a year and a half ago or 2 years ago that the rate was the key element. If we can just get the rates down, everything will be okay. in that time frame, like a lot of people, we've had to get a little bit smarter as to what all the underlying factors are. Turns out the rate is a factor, but not the factor.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to from the comments. We have one comment today from LinkedIn related to the episode we did with Ari Rastegar. This one comes to us from Garangala. His comment is, "This is an amazing episode here by Ryan once again. Ari is an amazing story, and I've met him personally in Austin, Texas, where he spoke at a mastermind I was a part of about 2 years ago. The man is a genius, in my opinion, at development and extremely insightful." Appreciate the comment. Appreciate the support. Keep the comments coming, guys. Really appreciate seeing these. And again, it gives us more motivation as we continue to put out more content and everything. So again, really appreciate this comment, Garang. All right, well, let's move on to article number 2, which comes to us from Resi Club. Headline reads, "Home builders keep shrinking homes. Beazer's CEO says that's the wrong answer." From the article, Beazer Homes CEO Alan Merrill says many builders are responding to affordability pressure by shrinking home sizes or moving buyers further out, and argues that's the wrong answer. Instead of lowering the purchase price, Beazer is focused on lowering the ongoing cost of owning a home. Merrill said it's not just about what you can afford today at closing, it's about what it costs to own the home every month. Beazer's affordability strategy centers on 3 main areas. Number 1, energy efficiency and design. Every Beazer home is built to a higher benchmark with better insulation, filtration, and humidity control to reduce monthly utility and operating costs. Number 2, insurance cost reductions. Beazer's in-house insurance and title agency isn't profit driven, so savings are passed directly to buyers. And then number 3, mortgage cost reductions. Beazer's lending platform lets banks compete directly for borrowers rather than Beazer acting as the lender, helping buyers secure lower rates. And this is straight from the article, so this isn't me doing like an ad for these guys either. So I'm not necessarily promoting them. It's just what it says from this article. Continuing on here, Merrill compared the industry's approach to going backwards by offering what was available years ago instead of innovating forward. He said, quote, "I don't think that's a great long-term strategy. I want to deliver the version 19 and version 20 instead of saying, good news, you can buy something that was available 5 years ago." He also highlighted the growing impact of fees and regulations, noting that in some markets like Northern California, Beazer faces $140,000 in fees before breaking ground. Across the country, the burden has shifted heavily to new home buyers through impact and permit fees. Merrill summed it up by saying, quote, "The way I think about it is I don't want to sell you a cheaper home. I want to sell you a home that costs you less every month to live in and one that will still hold its value 5 or 10 years from now." He added, "If you can take $150 or $200 a month out of your operating cost, that's real affordability. We're not trying to sell you less house. We're trying to sell you a better, more efficient one." The overall message, Beazer aims to improve affordability by building smarter, more efficient homes that reduce monthly costs without sacrificing quality or size. So, what's the reality of this, Charles? Is this even something that can be done without shrinking the size of the house?
Well, I like this article only because it's a contrarian perspective to what I'm have been saying. So that part's good for discussion. He doesn't want it to change because that's a would be a dramatic shift in his business model. So he is well served to keep doing the things that he's doing, and that's their business model. Now, from a marketing standpoint, he's trying to sell value over price, which is good, right? That's any marketing professor in any college is going to talk to you about this is an option. It's not the only option, right? You can also sell on price. There are some other competitors of Beezer's that focus more on price than they do on the quality portion, as is their right? And they sell plenty of these homes focused on the price element. I think both groups can still make money doing their thing. It's not like he is serving a portion of the market that is going to go away, but there's a portion of the market that is not getting the thing that they can afford. So it's not like we're trying to have him make a thing to sell. Let's say his customer can afford his thing, great. But there's a customer that can't afford anybody's thing. No one's making the thing that they need, and so that's the part that he may be missing out on. It has nothing to do with the home size needing to change for him and his business, but somebody at some business needs to build a home that is affordable, probably needs a smaller form factor to get it there, or maybe it's a different type of home altogether, as we'll talk about with some of the pre-manufactured stuff. So it's just an interesting perspective. It serves him to not change his business model, but truthfully, I don't think he needs to change it. Somebody needs to do this other thing, but it doesn't have to be him.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense that his business model is set up in a way where what he's saying being building the home in a different or building the home the same way that they have been building the home does not necessarily require them to build smaller homes. It caught my attention when I saw this article because I know it's something we talk a lot about, and the next article we're going to get into is specifically about a different approach, different type of home to be sold that could be more affordable.
And he's absolutely right, though. There's a huge amount of cost that could be reduced without having to change the home size at all. So he's right. And somebody needs to also fight that fight. I agree. So that is a fight worth fighting. Absolutely. Make the home that is that size, make it more affordable without having to change it and make people give up a certain amount of square footage. Great. And then there's also this other thing over here that needs to hit a sub $200,000 price point, which he can't do and doesn't need to do. So two totally different discussions, really. If you bifurcate this appropriately, he's just talking about a different thing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that next one. That kind of segues in nicely to our next article, which is actually a LinkedIn post. And this LinkedIn post comes from Brian Spear. And reading from this, we're not in a housing crisis because we lack materials and capital. So continuing on here, HUD Secretary Scott Turner recently said the following, quote, "We've been running the same outdated plays for decades and they're not working," end quote. He's right. The traditional playbook is broken, and yet we keep calling the same plays, hoping for a different outcome. For decades, the U.S. has relied on the same outdated model for residential development: expensive, slow, and increasingly out of reach for the people who need it most. Meanwhile, manufactured housing has quietly emerged as one of the most efficient, affordable, and scalable solutions in real estate today. I've seen this play out firsthand over the past decade. Entire communities have been transformed at a fraction of traditional costs. Families priced out of conventional housing are able to attain homeownership. Investors are accessing long-term predictable returns in uncertain times. And yet, manufactured housing is still treated like a niche. The result is slower delivery, more bureaucracy, less housing supply, and more families left behind. In my opinion, manufactured housing should be the new blueprint. It won't solve every housing challenge, but it's already making an impact. If you are serious about scale, impact, and resilience, this is where you start. So I know we're going to jump into some of the comments here, but before we get into some comments, what are your thoughts on Brian's thoughts around manufactured housing?
Manufactured housing isn't the answer to everything, right? But it is specifically at there's a certain socioeconomic level that needs a thing that costs that much because that's what their income tells them, and that particular segment of the market is getting underserved. So I think the part that tends to get misconstrued, and that's the Beazer article is really interesting, is because they're trying to say that, oh, people are trying to take all of our nice big homes and make them smaller. Not necessarily, but we also need smaller homes, right? So it's this yes but scenario, and I think this is another situation where the manufactured home is the most affordable home in America by a long shot. It's not even close, right? There's nothing else you can buy for that price point. And you can go through all the different things. Well, they're not built to the same quality or they don't last as long. Yes, absolutely. And then the price is reflective of these facts. And that's okay. And what was really interesting in our particular business is that we did not have any interest in doing manufactured home parks until we started realizing, hey, some of the sites that we were finding, the things that didn't work for BTR or might not have worked for a traditional single family development, they might have been good for manufactured home parks. So when we ran the numbers a few years ago, we started looking at this and wait a minute, if we're committed to solving the housing crisis in a meaningful manner, we kind of have to have this as a tool in the tool belt because it is such an important part of solving the problem. And so then we started looking at the numbers. Turns out the cash flow on these things is bonkers, right? They're actually really a financially good move, and they're much easier to develop than pretty much anything else we were doing. So we added those as a tool in the tool belt and are doing some of those parks now. There are trailer parks, right? These are the things that we kind of picture in our head. And then there are manufactured home communities, which are a completely different thing. Amenities and maybe even a swimming pool and nice trees and beautiful scenarios that any of us would be happy living in. And so that's the thing that we need more of. And there's plenty of use cases for doing these at scale. But it is a particular asset class that does get pushed over in the corner as the redheaded stepchild. But when you just look at the numbers, it does make sense for a huge segment of the population that's currently getting underserved with any of the other options. So until somebody starts building other options that are affordable, this is for that particular population the affordable option.
Yeah, and the timing on this is interesting too, because we have an episode coming out tomorrow with Dave Cotter, and in that episode, we actually talk about some of the manufactured communities that him and his organization have developed. So we get into this topic a little bit more in tomorrow's interview episode. So those of you listening in now, you'll want to tune back in tomorrow as well to listen to that.
Something to note as the tail end on this, and I think our HUD secretary is right on point here. And this is a an apartment guy. Like, he worked for one of the largest apartment developers in the country, so he knows apartments, he knows commercial development, but yet he's thinking through what is actually needed, which I appreciate. What is really interesting is that you look at someone like Warren Buffett, who is betting on housing across the board, and he's bought big chunks of the national builders, but he's also bought big chunks of the manufactured home market, and he owns Clayton Homes and a bunch of, and I think some other ones. So he's betting on the housing market in general. And the housing market, if we're going to use that term, isn't just the traditional stick and brick home that we're thinking about. It's a bunch of different things because the swath that needs to be covered is broad. So smart minds are believing that this is a portion of the solution.
Well, let's scroll down here and we'll look at temperature check from the comments and what some of the other people who are commenting on this are saying. First comment here: this is the kind of thinking that actually moves the needle for communities. Super helpful having an industry guy like Scott Turner in that seat at HUD. He seems to be on top of it and has great thoughts and ideas. That's the kind of conviction the industry needs. Manufactured housing delivers both impact and sustainability when executed with integrity. Scaling this model responsibly could redefine what affordable housing really means. Seems Yeah, seems pretty supportive. I mean, again, it's a lot of people in the industry, so they're probably gonna be more supportive than not, but it does seem to be pretty positive.
Well, it would be difficult to look at the information with an unbiased view and have much of another approach. Like, the numbers just say that it's necessary.
Yeah, really interesting. As always, all the articles we cover, including this post, it will be in the show notes page. So if you look in the description, there's a link there to the show notes page. So you can click over to this specific LinkedIn post and you can read through the comments yourself in the article. And well, let's go ahead and move on to our final article, which is another LinkedIn post that comes from Jay Parsons. This to me is a pretty wild chart. It shows this: how many build to rent single family rental units are in a metro area and how big is BTR there relative to the apartment stock. So a few thoughts from Jay in this post: that Phoenix, ground zero for the institutional BTR movement, took off about a decade ago, ranks number 1 is not a surprise, but given the newness of the sector, it's kind of crazy that Phoenix's BTR stock is now more than 1/10 the size of its apartment stock. Total BTR units there are approaching 50,000. Despite the sheer volume, Phoenix's BTR market is performing roughly in line with other relatively high supplied Sunbelt markets in terms of occupancy at 93.1% and rent cuts at -1%, according to John Burns' data. So clearly there's been ample demand, even if some real competitive challenges for BTR operators there. But here's what might be more interesting. This chart, which I'll show here in a second, illustrates how early we are in the BTR development cycle. In essentially every other market, total BTR units are still minuscule, less than 4% of apartment stock in key markets like Dallas, Atlanta, Houston, Austin, Charlotte, Raleigh, Nashville, Orlando, Tampa, etc. It doesn't feel that way. It's probably because most BTR tends to cluster into the same outer submarkets of a given MSA. So with that, I'm not going to read through the rest of this here, but let's go ahead and look at the chart. So on the screen here, we can basically see Phoenix as a big outlier over to the right with about 50,000 total units, but also above 10% of the apartment stock. What catches your attention here, Charles, with this? I know you operate in this space as well.
Yeah, I love this one because I suspected that the numbers were something like this, but seeing it on a chart, and I'm an economist by nature, and so I love charts and graphs. This one for me is really cool. Phoenix is certainly an outlier, and I didn't realize how much of an outlier it was. Phoenix led the way with BTR. Dallas is right behind it, and I just didn't realize how much more significant the percentage was in Phoenix. What's been interesting is in Dallas, and he mentions this in there. We see this in some certain markets that we've been involved in, and it does tend to cluster, right? When you find us, nobody wants to be first, but when somebody is first to a market and it works and that thing leases up quick, then everybody jumps in. And so we tend to see that. A perfect example in Dallas Fort Worth is the 75 corridor north of McKinney, from McKinney to Anna and Melissa. That area just got a whole bunch of BTR dumped in it at one time, and that works great until it doesn't. Right, when you start to, you're going to eventually build out how many people want to, you're going to build enough units that not that many people want to go there to fill that amount of units. That amount of units doesn't look like it's a problem when you compare it to the Dallas metro, but it's too many in one specific submarket. And that's the challenge, is we need to find ways to better spread this product type over the metro area. And that's, I think, is the tough part, because a lot of the great locations just simply don't work for this product type. You need it closer to the city center. You need it in some of the core areas. Now, there are ways to do this. We've got one that we're doing now in the city of Garland. We're redeveloping a golf course to include 450 units of BTR. That's a rare one. But when you can find an infill scenario for BTR, I think that's probably what needs to happen more in a bunch of these big metros. Is infill BTR is really game changing, because now you've got tremendous rents because of proximity. And that's what's hard to do with BTR on the periphery, which is what we've seen a lot of in most of these metros, is BTR on the edge. And you're going to hit a point where you get too many in a specific submarket, and then it's a challenge. So BTR, like he says in the article, it's still a baby. It's still just in its infancy of trying to figure out what is going to become a monster of an asset class. And as it's figuring out its way, it's still got Bambi legs a bit. And anybody who's in that space will agree that we're still figuring out and still adjusting. It's still evolving in a lot of different ways. And so this is good data for those of us that are in that space on a daily basis to really help kind of distill the things that we need to do. But it does say very clearly, we're not even close to having a problem on being overbuilt. We've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and looking at a few of the comments here on this. So first one here, yes, it is early in the BTR development cycle. Another stat from Burns Data: as recently as Q3 2022, there had never been more than 20 markets with 100 or more BTR deliveries in a quarter.
Yeah. And that really tells about how concentrated this early movement in BTR has been. It's really been concentrated on just a handful. I mean, you count them on two hands probably, how many markets were really getting a lot of BTR momentum. So there's many markets that haven't even touched yet. And that'll begin to happen. I think we're probably at a point now where, well, we're going to see a lot more of those middle markets get more BTR.
And then just a couple others here. So question on here from someone saying, why Phoenix? Why so special? And Jay Parsons responds, it's where it all started, an HQ for a lot of big BTR players.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. I don't think there's any reason to overanalyze that, other than that's just where it started and that's where the momentum was at that time.
Yeah. Any others in here you wanted to see, Charles, that caught your attention?
If you go up just a little bit, I thought this comment was really interesting. The one by Keaton there, and he's talking about this one particular deal closed on a sub 5 cap BTR asset, and he says Southeast Valley. So I don't know which valley, but sub 5 cap is pretty great in 2025. And then last week, a national multifamily developer took down a BTR site at $75K per door in the Southeast Valley. So, which I don't know which Southeast Valley he's talking about, but $75K a door is for the dirt. That's steep. At least in my world, I would consider that steep for BTR. But I think it just underscores how powerful this is and what rents can be achieved in the right locations with this asset class. So obviously, I think most of the stuff we're trying to do is in the $10,000 to $20,000 a door for the dirt. So this is a totally different echelon, And I think the rents in many cases will support that. So really interesting to see, we're closing on sub 5 cap BTR, maybe stronger ability to sell at those cap rates right now in BTR than you might find in multifamily. Multifamily is having some challenges and rents going down, whereas BTR is still maintaining very strong cap rates because the rents are good. Anyway, so just underscores the fact that that asset class is maintaining a little bit of a stronger position than say multifamily at the moment.
Well, that brings us to the end here. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I love this particular set of articles because this hit on all the different things that I touch in my day to day. So this is great for me. This really speaks to a lot of things that I do. So I hope some other people got some benefit out of it.
All right, guys. Well, that is all for this episode. I haven't asked for a little while, but we've had a lot of people joining or subscribing every single week, new listeners every single week. And if some of you have been listening for a while and you haven't left us a rating and review on Apple, if you're listening on Apple, we'd really appreciate you doing that. It helps get our show in front of more people who are looking for this type of content. And if you're on Spotify, if you just leave us a rating on there, we'd really appreciate that. Otherwise, that is all for this episode. And hopefully you'll tune back in tomorrow with our conversation with Dave Cotter. All right. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.